This yellow Labrador named Max is going to do marvel for his owner, Thomas. Because of him, Thomas will live again. In the heart of Ashwood City, a huge crowd filled St. Augustine's Cemetery, their faces heavy with sadness for Thomas Reed, a 35-year-old architect who died without warning. The coffin, made of shiny dark wood, stood ready to be lowered into the cold, wet grave. Rain clouds hung low, making the city skyline look gray and grim. Max, Thomas's yellow Labrador, stood right by the coffin. His golden fur shook in the chilly wind. His eyes were wide, fierce, and full of fear. People thought Max was just mourning. They whispered about his loyalty, how he never left Thomas's side. But Max was no ordinary dog. For 10 years he had been Thomas's best friend, always knowing when Thomas was happy, sad, or scared. Max could feel things others couldn't. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm curious to see how far our stories reach. Now, as the minister's voice read the final prayers slow and heavy, Max let out a deep growl. It echoed across the cemetery, louder than the city's hum of cars and sirens. Everyone froze. The sound wasn't just grief, it was a warning. Then Max barked sharp and fast, over and over, like he was shouting, "Thomas is alive!" The crowd stared, their hearts racing. Some stepped back, unsure. Others leaned closer, drawn to the yellow Labrador's wild energy. Clara, Thomas's girlfriend, stood closest to the coffin. She wore a black dress and held a veil to her face. Her tears looked real, but they were fake. Clara hid a terrible secret. 3 nights ago, in their fancy high-rise apartment, she had poured a drug into Thomas's tea. The drug was rare, hard to find. It made Thomas's heart slow down so much he looked dead. But he wasn't dead. He was in a deep coma, trapped in a body that couldn't move or speak. Clara planned it all. She wanted Thomas's money, his big estate, his bank accounts. She thought no one would ever know. But Max knew. Max had seen her that night, sneaking the vial from her purse. He smelled the strange, bitter scent in Thomas's cup. Now Max barked at Clara, his eyes locked on hers, full of anger. It was like he could see her guilt, like he was calling her out. Clara's hands shook. She yelled, "Get that dog away!" Her voice was sharp, breaking with panic. But Max didn't stop. He jumped at the coffin, his paws scratching the wood, his barks louder, fiercer. The men holding the coffin's ropes looked at each other. They didn't know what to do. Their hands froze, the ropes slipping a little. The crowd got louder, their whispers turning into questions. Why was Max acting like this? Why wouldn't he let the coffin go? Was something wrong? A woman in the crowd said, "Dog knows something." A man nodded, his eyes on Max. The air felt heavy, like a storm was about to break. Dr. Ellis, a tired-looking doctor from Ashwood General Hospital, pushed through the crowd. His coat was wrinkled, his face lined with worry. He had seen Thomas's body in the hospital. He had checked Thomas himself, felt no pulse, seen no breath. He had signed the paper that said Thomas was dead. But now, watching Max, Dr. Ellis felt a knot in his stomach. Something wasn't right. Max's barks were too strong, too sure. Dr. Ellis knelt beside the yellow Labrador. He put a hand on Max's fur, feeling the dog's heart pound. "What's wrong, boy?" he asked, his voice low. Max looked at him, then back at the coffin. He whined a sad, begging sound like he was saying, "Please check again." Dr. Ellis stood up. His eyes moved to the coffin. It was still open a little for the final goodbye. Clara saw him looking and stepped forward. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "Let Thomas rest in peace." Her face was red, her eyes darting around. But the crowd wasn't listening to her. They were watching Max, waiting for what would happen next. Dr. Ellis raised his hand. His voice was calm but firm. "Open the coffin," he said. The crowd gasped. Some people covered their mouths. Others leaned in, holding their breath. The men by the coffin hesitated, looking at Clara, then at Dr. Ellis. Clara shook her head, her voice rising. "No, this is wrong. You can't do this." But Dr. Ellis didn't back down. "Open it," he said again, louder. The men nodded. They pulled the ropes, lifting the coffin lid slowly. The wood creaked, the sound sharp in the quiet cemetery. Everyone stared. Thomas lay inside, still as a statue. His face was pale, almost white. His lips were blue like ice. Clara's heart pounded so hard she thought it would burst. Her plan was falling apart. She wanted to run, but her legs felt heavy. All eyes were on Thomas now. Dr. Ellis stepped closer. He pulled a stethoscope from his bag. His hands shook a little as he placed it on Thomas's chest. The crowd was silent. Even the city seemed to stop. No cars, no wind, just quiet. Dr. Ellis listened. 1 second passed, 2 seconds, 3. His face was still, his eyes focused. Then suddenly his eyes widened. He pressed the stethoscope harder. He leaned closer, his breath fast. "He's alive," he whispered. The words were so soft, they almost disappeared. Then he looked up, his voice loud and clear. "He's alive!" The crowd exploded. People shouted, cried, called out Thomas's name. Some fell to their knees, shocked. Others grabbed each other, their faces full of hope. Clara stumbled back, her veil falling to the ground. She tried to cry, to look surprised, but her face showed fear. Max stopped barking. He lay down by the coffin, his yellow fur wet from the rain. He whimpered softly, his body tired but calm. He had done his job. Paramedics ran through the crowd, carrying bags and machines. They pushed people aside, kneeling by Thomas. They put an oxygen mask on his face. They hooked him to a monitor. The machine beeped, slow at first, then stronger. Thomas's chest moved, just a little. His heart was beating, weak but there. The paramedics worked fast, shouting orders. "Get him to Ashwood General now," one said. They lifted Thomas onto a stretcher and ran to the ambulance. The crowd parted, watching, praying. Max stood up, his eyes following Thomas. He wanted to go, but Dr. Ellis held his collar gently. "You did good, boy," he said. Clara stood alone now, her hands shaking. She looked at the crowd, trying to smile, but her eyes darted to a man standing far back. It was Dr. Harlan, a pharmacist from the city's medical district. He wore a dark coat, his face pale. He was part of her plan. He had given her the drug, told her it would work perfectly. But now he looked scared, his hands in his pockets, his eyes avoiding hers. Clara didn't know why. She didn't know that Dr. Harlan had a secret of his own. 2 days ago, guilt had eaten at him. He couldn't live with what they were doing. So he changed the drug. He gave Clara a weaker dose, not the strong one she thought. It was just enough to keep Thomas alive, just enough for his heart to beat so softly that only Max could sense it. Max, the yellow Labrador, had known the truth all along. He had felt Thomas's life hidden deep inside. His barks had broken through the lie, loud and clear, like a siren in the city's noise. He had saved Thomas from a grave that was meant to lock him away forever. The ambulance doors slammed shut. The siren screamed as it sped away, cutting through the city streets. The crowd stayed, talking, crying, looking at Max with awe. They called him a hero, a miracle dog. But Max just sat there, his yellow fur shining in the rain, his eyes calm now. He had done what he needed to do. He had brought Thomas back from the edge. But the story wasn't over. Clara's secret was out, but she wasn't done yet. And Dr. Harlan's choice had changed everything. There were more truths to uncover, more dangers waiting in the shadows of Ashwood City. Max had won this fight, but he would need to stay sharp, because Thomas's life was still at risk, and only Max could protect him. The ambulance sirens wailed through Ashwood City's crowded streets, carrying Thomas Reed to Ashwood General Hospital, where doctors fought to pull him from the coma that almost buried him alive. Max, the yellow Labrador, stayed behind in the cemetery, his golden fur soaked from rain, his eyes fixed on the spot where Thomas's coffin had stood. The crowd still buzzed, their voices loud with shock and wonder. They called Max a hero, a dog who knew Thomas wasn't dead, but Max didn't care about their words. He felt Thomas's life, faint but real, and he knew the fight wasn't over. At the hospital, doctors worked fast. They hooked Thomas to machines, their screens flashing numbers and lines. His heart beat slowly, too weak to promise he'd wake up. Nurses ran in and out, carrying trays of tools. Dr. Ellis stood by Thomas's bed, his face tight with worry. He kept thinking about Max, how the yellow Labrador's barks had made him check the coffin. Without Max, Thomas would be in the ground now. But something felt wrong. Dr. Ellis remembered Clara's face at the cemetery, her fake tears, her sharp voice. She didn't seem happy Thomas was alive. She seemed scared. Clara was at the hospital now, sitting in the waiting room. Her black dress was wrinkled, her veil gone. She twisted her hands, her nails digging into her skin. She needed to think fast. Her plan to kill Thomas for his money was falling apart. People were talking, asking questions. They wondered why Thomas wasn't really dead. Clara knew she had to act. She had to make sure Thomas didn't wake up. If he did, he might remember the tea, the bitter taste, her nervous smile that night. She couldn't let that happen. Clara stood up, her heels clicking on the hospital floor. She walked to a quiet hallway, pulling out her phone. She called Dr. Harlan, the pharmacist who gave her the drug. "What happened?" she whispered, her voice low and angry. "You said the drug would work." "He's alive." Dr. Harlan's voice shook on the phone. "I don't know, Clara. I gave you what you asked for." But he was lying. Dr. Harlan hadn't told Clara the truth. He had given her a weaker drug, not the one she wanted. He couldn't live with killing Thomas. He thought the weaker drug would just make Thomas sleep, not stop his heart. But he didn't expect Max to know, to bark and save Thomas. Now Dr. Harlan was scared. He knew Clara was dangerous. He knew she wouldn't stop. Clara hung up, her face hard. She didn't trust Dr. Harlan anymore. She had to finish this herself. She slipped into Thomas's hospital room when no one was looking. The room was dim, the only sound the beep of machines. Thomas lay still, his face pale, tubes in his arms. Clara stared at him, her heart cold. She reached into her purse, pulling out a small syringe. It had a different drug, one she'd kept just in case. One push, and Thomas would never wake up. Her hand shook as she moved closer, the syringe glinting in the low light. But then a noise stopped her. A low growl came from the doorway. Clara turned, her breath catching. It was Max. The yellow Labrador had slipped away from the cemetery. A kind nurse who saw Max's loyalty had brought him to the hospital. Now Max stood there, his fur bristling. His eyes locked on Clara. He knew what she was doing. He bared his teeth, his growl louder, filling the room. Clara froze, the syringe tight in her hand. "Get out," she hissed, but Max didn't move. He took a step closer, his barks sharp and fierce, like he was saying, "I won't let you hurt him." Nurses heard the noise and ran in. They saw Clara, the syringe, her guilty face. "What are you doing?" one nurse shouted. Clara dropped the syringe, her hands shaking. "I was just checking on him." She lied, but her voice was weak. The nurses didn't believe her. They called security. Max kept barking, standing by Thomas's bed, guarding him. Security guards came, their boots loud on the floor. They grabbed Clara's arms. She screamed, "Let me go! I didn't do anything." But everyone saw the syringe, the fear in her eyes. The nurses checked Thomas. He was still alive, his heart still beating. Max's barks had saved him again. The guards took Clara away, her shouts echoing down the hall. But the danger wasn't gone. Dr. Harlan was still out there, and he had his own secrets. He wasn't just a pharmacist. He was Clara's cousin, a fact no one in Ashwood City knew. They had planned this together, but he betrayed her with the weaker drug. Now he was panicking. He knew Clara would tell the police about him to save herself. Dr. Harlan decided to run. He packed a bag, grabbed cash, and headed for the city's edge. But someone was watching him. A woman named Sarah, Thomas's sister, had been at the cemetery. She didn't trust Clara from the start. Sarah was a private investigator, smart and sharp. She had seen Dr. Harlan's nervous face, his quick glances at Clara. She followed him now, her car hidden in the city's traffic. Sarah knew something bigger was going on. She found a file in Thomas's apartment, hidden in a drawer. It had papers about a secret project Thomas was working on, a new building design worth millions. Clara wasn't just after Thomas's money, she wanted the project too, and Dr. Harlan was helping her sell it to a shady company. Sarah's heart raced. She had to stop them. Back at the hospital, Max stayed by Thomas's side. The yellow Labrador lay on the floor, his head resting near Thomas's hand. Doctors said Thomas was getting stronger, but he wasn't awake yet. Max didn't move. He sensed the danger still out there. He felt it in his bones, the way he felt Thomas's life in the coffin. The city outside was loud, full of lights and noise, but Max was calm, ready. He had saved Thomas twice, but he knew Clara and Dr. Harlan weren't the only ones involved. There was another person, someone higher up, pulling the strings. A man in a dark suit had been at the cemetery, watching from a distance. Max had seen him, smelled his sharp cologne. The man hadn't come to the hospital, but Max remembered his face. The yellow Labrador's ears twitched, his eyes alert. He would protect Thomas, no matter what. The hospital room was quiet now, but the city was alive with secrets. Sarah was closing in on Dr. Harlan, her car weaving through the streets. Clara was in a holding cell, her mind racing for a way out. And Thomas, still in his coma, was starting to dream. He saw Max, heard his barks, felt the cold coffin. His fingers twitched just a little. He was fighting to wake up. Max lifted his head, sensing the change. He whined softly, his yellow fur glowing in the hospital light. The story was far from over. A bigger twist was coming, one that would shake Ashwood City to its core. Clara and Dr. Harlan were just pieces in a larger game, and Max, the yellow Labrador, was the only one who could stop it. He had brought Thomas back from the grave, but now he had to keep him alive in a city full of lies. Max, the yellow Labrador, lay by Thomas's hospital bed in Ashwood General, his golden fur soft under the dim lights, his eyes sharp and watchful. Thomas was still in a coma, but his fingers twitched now, his chest rising stronger with each breath. The machines beeped steadily, a sign he was fighting to wake up. Max sensed it, his tail flicking slightly, but he also felt danger, like a shadow moving through the city. Ashwood City streets glowed with neon signs and headlights, hiding secrets in every corner. Clara was locked in a police cell downtown, her face pale, her mind racing. She knew her plan to kill Thomas for his money and his secret building project had failed. Max's barks had ruined everything, first at the cemetery, then in the hospital room when she tried to finish Thomas with a syringe. Now the police were asking questions, digging into her life. Clara was scared, but she wasn't done. She had one last move. She told the police about Dr. Harlan, her cousin, the pharmacist who gave her the drug. He forced me. She lied, her voice shaking. He wanted Thomas's money too. Clara thought this would save her, make her look like a victim. But Dr. Harlan was already on the run, speeding out of the city in a stolen car. He knew Clara would betray him. He felt guilty for helping her, for giving her the weaker drug that let Thomas live. But he was terrified of something bigger, someone more dangerous than Clara. Sarah, Thomas's sister, the private investigator, was close behind him. She tailed his car through Ashwood's outskirts, her hands tight on the wheel. Sarah had found Thomas's hidden file, the one about his building design, a project worth millions. She knew Clara and Dr. Harlan weren't working alone. There was a man in a dark suit, someone Max had seen at the cemetery, someone who smelled of sharp cologne. Sarah had a name now, Victor Kane, a rich businessman who owned half the city's skyline. Victor wanted Thomas's project to control Ashwood's future. He had paid Clara and Dr. Harlan to kill Thomas and steal the plans. Sarah's heart pounded. She had to catch Dr. Harlan before he disappeared, before Victor got away. Back at the hospital, Max's ears twitched. He heard footsteps, soft but wrong. A nurse walked in, her smile too stiff, her hands hidden in her pockets. Max growled, low and steady. The nurse flinched, her eyes darting to Thomas. She wasn't a nurse. She worked for Victor Kane, sent to finish what Clara couldn't. She pulled a small bottle from her pocket, ready to put it in Thomas's IV line. Max jumped up, his barks loud, filling the room. The woman stepped back, her face pale. "Quiet, dog," she hissed, but Max lunged, his teeth bared, his yellow fur bristling. Doctors ran in, alerted by the noise. They saw the woman, the bottle, her fake badge. "Stop her," a doctor yelled. Security grabbed her arms. She screamed, dropping the bottle, which shattered on the floor. Max stood by Thomas, his barks fading to a growl, his eyes never leaving her. The doctors checked Thomas. He was safe, his heart still beating. Max had saved him again. The police took the fake nurse away, her shouts echoing down the hall. They found her phone, full of texts from Victor Kane, proof he was behind it all. At the same time, Sarah caught up to Dr. Harlan. His car skidded off the road in the rain, crashing into a ditch. Sarah parked and ran to him, her flashlight cutting through the dark. Dr. Harlan was hurt, his face bloody but alive. It was Victor Kane. He gasped, his voice weak. He planned everything. He wanted Thomas dead. Sarah recorded his words, her hands steady. She called the police, who arrived fast, their lights flashing. Dr. Harlan confessed, telling them about Victor, Clara, and the project. The police moved quickly, raiding Victor's penthouse in the city's tallest building. They found him packing a suitcase, ready to flee. Papers about Thomas's project were on his desk, proof of his greed. Victor tried to lie, but the evidence was too strong. The fake nurse's text, Dr. Harlan's confession, Clara's story falling apart. The police cuffed him, his face red with anger. Back at the hospital, something changed. Thomas's eyes fluttered. He took a deep breath, his voice a whisper. "Max," he said, his hand reaching out. Max whined, his tail wagging, his nose touching Thomas's fingers. The doctors rushed in, amazed. Thomas was waking up, his body fighting the drug, his mind coming back. He remembered bits and pieces, the tea, Clara's strange look, Max's barks in the dark. Sarah arrived, her face tired but happy. She told Thomas everything about Clara, Dr. Harlan, Victor Kane. Thomas listened, his eyes weak but clear. He looked at Max, his yellow Labrador, and smiled. "You saved me, boy," he said, his voice soft. Max lay down, his head on Thomas's bed, calm at last. The city outside kept moving, its lights bright, its secrets exposed. Clara, Dr. Harlan, and Victor were in jail, their plans destroyed. The police found more evidence, emails and bank records, showing how Victor had controlled everything. But there was one final twist. Thomas's project wasn't just a building. It was a plan to make Ashwood City better, with homes for the poor, parks for kids, places for everyone. Victor wanted it for profit, but Thomas wanted it for people. Sarah gave the plans to the city, making sure Thomas's dream would live on. The news spread, and Ashwood City called Max a hero. People brought flowers to the hospital, leaving them for the yellow Labrador who never gave up. Thomas got stronger every day, his voice louder, his smile brighter. He walked out of the hospital a month later, Max by his side, his golden fur shining in the sun. The city cheered, cameras flashing, but Max just looked at Thomas, his eyes full of love. The danger was gone, the truth was out, and Thomas was alive because of Max. The yellow Labrador had done Marvel, just as promised, pulling Thomas from a grave, guarding him through the dark, and bringing him back to life in a city that would never forget his name.